I think that trade tells me that as much as they keep saying that they believe in him, they really truly don't. I look at Sam Howell, I just look at his game, and there's too many times where he was to me he was inconsistent, and that ACC was not a tough conference last year.
Yeah.
Did this past year.
Well, let's bring in Chris Franklin, and maybe he can help us answer that question. There we go. There he
Hey
is.
guys, how y'all doing?
Chris Franklin, NJ.com. Good to see you, Chris.
Good to see you
At
too. Sorry about that.
C Franklin News. Follow him on Twitter. Jody and I were just discussing receivers, and we know what we've been through. We have a 110-meter Olympian hurdle. So, but I don't think that's what they want to do to improve. So we were talking about, and Jody was mentioning, do the Eagles need to do a better job explaining to veteran receivers that they're going to get the football more if they come here? Is there sort of this disconnect with some of these receivers thinking, I don't want to go there. I'm not going to get the football. And do you think they need to do a better sell job?
I think so, because when you look at the guys, like when you've come out and say, yeah, we got guys like Devonta and Dallas, and we want to make sure we get them their touches, 100 plus targets a season. And oh yeah, by the way, we'll feed you some crumbs. Be going to be happy with that. Because over time, you just can start to think like, nah, I'll go elsewhere and maybe get some more targets. I think that they have to if that's their true thinking, I think that's a little concerning. I know Smith can get it. I know Dallas is really good, but if you can get a top tier wide receiver, okay, yeah, that works out. And I think the only way they're going to be able to get somebody like that now is trade, because at least by then say, hey, we got your rights. Either you come on the field and you play, or hey, sorry, you're out. So they have to do a better job with that.
Trade and or draft. And they have two
True.
first-round draft picks, and we all kind of believe they'll be targeting a wide receiver with one of those two first-round picks, even though it'll be the third consecutive year they've taken a wide receiver in the first round with mixed results. I don't know that we've asked you this. The top wide receivers in the draft, give us your rankings. Assume that all are left on the board when the Eagle pick. That's probably not happening, but just hypothetically. Give us the way you rank them, who you think will be on the board, who you think they'll be there for the Eagles to choose, and which way you think they're leaning.
I think Drake London, I think really is for me. I think he really is a top for me for basically what the fit this team needs, because when you look at his size, and I know everybody keeps saying, oh, it's JJ Arcega-Whiteside incarnate, it happened for the second version. I think he's still all right. I think he can still be that guy, that X receiver. And then I look at Garrett Wilson. I think he does really well. I think he could be really good in this offense and be that speed guy that you hope Jalen Reagor would have been, but we saw what happened there. And then you have, I think, looking after that, Traylon Burks for me, then followed by Chris Olave. I think those guys. But the one guy, I think Sky Moore, I'm really high. If they don't pick one, see, for me, I think I don't think they use the first two on a wide receiver. I think they go in like second or third round. I really think there's a certain round for like a Sky Moore or somebody else around there, and hopefully not Christian Watson, because we've seen what happened with North Dakota guys. But you never know. I really think I'd really look at a Garrett Wilson or Drake London.
Is that because of Devin Allen? They don't have to go in the first round.
you know, when it comes to guys like that, you think like, hey, you know what? I think this is a person right here. Now, see, the only thing I can see him being is like a kick returner, because
they need a kick returner. That's a good point. They need a kick returner. They need a punt returner. Yeah. They need special teams help. They were bad on special teams. But before we get on that track, you mentioned Jalen Reagor, Chris. Mm-hmm. I want your percentage. It's May 1st. Percentage Jalen Reagor's on the Philadelphia Eagles May 1st after the draft.
25. And that's being kind. I really think, looking at a lot of these moves that they made right now and the talk of the receivers and the way this room is shaping out to be, if you can't consistently catch the ball, if you can't consistently run the right routes, okay, he's gone. You can't do that. If you're fumbling, if you can't really handle punts and you're constantly bobbling that, then you start to question, like, okay, what do you bring to the team? And if you can't do both of those, and the way this roster currently is constructed, I just don't see him on here for long term. I don't think he makes it out of training camp.
All right, Devin Allen. You know, he reminds me of who I thought of today.
Jeremy
Thought of him in 10
Carlos?
years.
Jeremy
John?
Bloom. Jeremy Bloom.
Jeremy Bloom. The last time the Philadelphia Eagles went wide receiver on an Olympic star. And oh, by the way, I'll take a track and field guy over a skier every day of the week. But yeah, and Bloom wasn't terrible. They did use a draft pick on him and didn't get a lot. I would call him a mediocre success at best, but he wasn't a failure. And they're risking even that much less. But rolling the dice with former Olympics, I'm not sure about. And oh, by the way, I would call London at worst. You a little disrespectful there, Mr. Franklin, calling him the next J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. No, he's the combination of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Nelson Aguilar, because you got to take in consideration USC. So if you take a USC player with a big player who can block and doesn't necessarily catch, that's what you may have.
50
if you
catches
take
and 550
yards. I think, I'm not sure, but failure plus failure probably equals failure.
I learned that, I learned in math, if you take two things, you cancel them out, it actually makes a positive. So maybe that's
right. There you go, Franklin. Good job out of you.
That's that new math. I can't do the new math.
Thanks for smacking in. You helped me out when it came to math. It came in handy here.
I definitely can't do the new math. But I know that we haven't talked to you since the big trade. And I give Howie Roseman credit from a valuation standpoint, as I always say. Obviously, you look at any trade chart, he got the best of Mickey Loomis by a significant degree. Now, ultimately, you got to turn it into players, but just the philosophy, the sentiment of the trade, the kick in the can to get another pick in 2023. What does it tell you about this team right now and where they are specifically? Let's be blunt, at the quarterback position with Jalen Hurts. What does it tell you, that trade?
I think that trade tells me that as much as they keep saying that they believe in him, they really truly don't. And I disagree with that sentiment. I thought that I understand why they did it. I understand that they needed to get more pieces to possibly trade for another quarterback next year. I get that. But when you finally have a guy who's been in the same system for 2 straight years in a row now, you got a guy who's shown that he can improve a little bit more. I'd probably talk a little bit of belief in that way too. But I think it's just more just to help him out. I think I know it's a smaller move, especially with that. I think it helps a little bit with the salary cap. I think they were trying to hope to sign somebody else a little bit more, but not having to pay another first-round draft pick and get to defer that to next year. I think that was a little boost, but we've seen what's going on with the free agent market, so that's not really doing. But that's not really helping out right now.
All right, Chris, I'm sending this question your way, but Johnny, if you want to jump in and answer it as well, appreciate it. The Eagles lost a couple of key front office personnel during this offseason, guys that have gone elsewhere to become assistant general managers. To my knowledge, they have not hired anyone to replace either of these two guys. Now, the Eagles have a pretty good front office staff to begin with. John and I have kind of poked some fun at the Bengals during this year, the Super Bowl competing Bengals, and the size of their staff as compared to someone like the Eagles. So I'm not saying the Eagles are woefully undermanned, but I don't know that they've used anybody to replace those guys. And if they haven't, then the dynamic come draft time changes. That they always tell us about the collaborative effort that it is, and a lot of people's opinions are sought, and then a decision is made draft day. It's Howie's final call, but he leans on a lot of people for that information. As far as you can tell, Chris, your sources, how things are working, as we're now less than 3 weeks away from the draft, are the Eagles missing those two individuals that left to go elsewhere? And is there a different dynamic in this upcoming Eagle draft this year because of it?
From what I've heard a couple weeks ago, that they basically haven't replaced those guys truly in full and earnest, and that Roseman's had to take a little bit more of the onus of himself. But I think when it comes to that as well, too, that's why one reason why they put that proposal on the table and they joined the 3 other teams, such as the Bills and Ravens, to not have everybody just basically raid them. I think when you look at this now, I think of all time, it's the last moment you possibly want that, having all these first round picks. And when you lose Ian Cunningham and when you lose Brandon Brown, guys who knew what the way the organization run, the philosophy was, who started to know what these coaches wanted to, and you lose them now you lost them 2 months before the draft was supposed to happen. That does impact you. That's a lot of knowledge a lot of resources that went into them. And when you look at the future, I think the onus is going to be more on Roseman. I think there'll still be that collaboration. You'll still hear Sirianni, still hear Gannon, still hear Steichen. All these guys will still have a say in what the guys they want. And when the draft room ultimately falls on Howie, but I think it's going to affect them. I think these guys were really, really good, in my opinion. They were good talent evaluators, especially in the scout. They came from the college scouting department as well, too. They really focused on that too. But a lot of that work was done during the season, so they have some of the notes. But I think when it comes down to it, that might be it's going to wind up being. I think it's going to be a huge loss for them, especially one that's going within the division to the Giants.
Yeah, and Howie was upset about that one specifically because it was obviously a division rival, and that's Brandon Brown. But let's stay off the field, and since it's landscaping season, I can't get these mowers slowly. But I because a number of teams started their off-season work today, Chris. Some started last week. These are only teams with new coaches that can start this early. But the Eagles could start April 25th, April 18th. They are starting April 25th. They're not having a mandatory minicamp. They're one of two teams in the entire NFL not having a mandatory minicamp, along with those Cincinnati Bengals, Jody. What the heck is going on here? Why do the Eagles, do they think it works so well in the pandemic era? You don't have a lot of time with these players to begin with. Why are the Eagles intent on lessening that time?
When I hear like they don't have a mandatory, to me it's like that Catherine Hahn gif, what they do from a WandaVision with a little winking, go, "Hey, you're not going to that one." Yeah, I think it's one of those things like it's not mandatory, but I think it's one of those things where Nick is still trying. I think he probably listened to the veterans. I think when you look at what happened last year when it came to minicamps, the way they worked it out because they didn't want to come in, and it was like, "Hey, you know what? They worked out." I think he wants to keep that open. Like, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to force you guys to come in here." But I think you'll probably see everybody. I think you'll see close to everybody there, especially from. I know a few people want to be there. So they're going to be there as well too. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see nearly a lot of people there at the actual mini camps, even though they're not mandatory. Because
I agree.
I
They're going to have close to 100% at voluntary. But I mean, was this, if you ask the players, they're going to say, well, we don't need that. And to be honest, look, the Jason Kelce's and the Fletcher Coxes of the world, Lane Johnson, they don't need it. They don't need that nonsense. I talk about it all the time. But it's pretty meaningful for the young players who aren't even here yet, the guys they're going to draft, the undrafted free agents. At some point, you got to stand up to the veteran players and say, all right, you got to come in for 3 days. I'm sorry, but you got to come in. I mean, Nick's a nice guy, but sometimes you can't be the players' friends. You got to be their boss. 3 days is 3 days. And if they're not going to come in for voluntary work because they got to show up for 3 days in June, maybe you're not building the right program if that's the case. Is that where we are?
I don't think so. I think it's one of the things that I think if you're changing the whole defensive system now, I think it's going to be key. Just all of a sudden you see all the defensive guys there, and it was a week mandatory. I think that's when you'll start to see maybe there's something here where they may be tweaking the defense a little bit more, and that's when it's called a mandatory. Like, we're not calling it mandatory, but you better daggone know that he's texting them a lot, saying show up here, or we'll start to look to replace you. I see one of those things happening. But I think overall, I think everybody knows what their job is, and I think everybody knows what they have to do. So in this, especially in this day and age, if it was about like 10 years ago, I think we see this more and more, but I think more and more teams, I wouldn't be surprised to see the following year, we see more and more teams going to not call it mandatory. We're going more towards that because everybody, for better or for worse, everybody's more lax about this stuff now and say, hey, you know what, we're just going to worry about really being physical around toward the later end of training camp and more into the season as opposed to putting extra stress throughout the season now.
See, Franklin, something we talk about a lot here on the show, and we should because it is part of an off season in the National Football League, is leverage. the players always think they have leverage. The teams always think they have leverage. It's finding that middle spot where your belief in leverage meets the team's belief in leverage. We're in a unique position right now, 2 weeks before the draft, where both probably think they've got the leverage. The players think, well, they want a given. I'm a given. They don't have to worry about the draft if they sign me. And the teams are thinking, oh, yeah, you're not going to take our offer? You realize how many draft picks we have, right? We're going to get a younger, cheaper guy in here, and you're going to turn down our offer. Who really is in the better leverage spot? 2 weeks away from the draft. Is it players or is it teams? Who's got more leverage right now?
I'd probably say teams right now have more leverage, especially if you have 5 picks in the first 101 picks, 5 pick selections in the first 101 goes, oh, yeah, really? We can get one of the best 100 college players right now to come in. Well, you hope 100 best ones, but you hope we're going to get one right now for it. If you want to keep running your mouth and saying, hey, no, you can't do this, well, we'll just get rid of you. I think it's more towards that point now. And I think the teams have it before then, and then I think the players have it a little bit more toward like June 1st and everything, because everybody's going to make that mad dash of trying to fill out the rest of their rosters ahead of training camp, and then you start to see more and more. I think players have a little bit leverage, especially when teams get desperate if there's injuries and stuff like that. So right now, I think teams have a little leverage, and they may be nudging a little bit more. I think when you look at what they did with the Eagles, they were Rodney McLeod. Even though they pretty much said, hey, you know what, we're going with Anthony Harrison, we're not signing you, but I think they had a little bit more leverage if they wanted to bring him back and just go, you're going to take this number here, and if not, then we'll just go in a different direction. And I think ultimately what they did that there.
You mentioned those first 101 picks, Chris, and how much the Eagles have. So a lot of people understandably focus on the first round, 15 and 18, but I want to go in a different direction because I want to talk about those 101. That's where you want guys to contribute at least. So obviously you want starters at the top, but you want at least contributors. Give me one guaranteed position. The Eagles are no question in those top 101 picks in one position they're guaranteed not to take in those top 101 picks.
Ooh. Guaranteed. That's a good question. I'd probably go quarterback. I probably would, because I'm looking right now. I think Malik Willis will go. I don't think they're trading up for Malik Willis. I don't think Kenny Pickett's coming here. I don't think Matt Corral's coming here. I think the Saints, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints took Matt Corral at 18. And some of the other guys are there. I think they're, if anybody, I think they trade for one. So I'd probably say quarterback now, with tackle being a close second, given that you have Lane and Jordan Mailata. But I really think right now, I think unless something pops up where we see Malik Willis in like a gas mask with a bong or something like that popping up and he falls that way, hit, wink, wink. But yeah, unless we see something like that, I don't foresee him. And then when you look at Pickett and Corral, I just don't think they'll go out their way to pick somebody like that. And Carson Strong, I like Carson Strong though, but
let me follow that one up. If you have Carson Strong, Matt Corral.
Well, I need your guaranteed prediction first, Jody. So what position are they guaranteed to come out of? There's probably a lot, but if you're saying even if things fall in a negative, say the top 5 edge rushers aren't there at 15, are they still going to get one at 101? They're still going to get a receiver no matter what, which is the one position you say 100% they're coming out of there.
I like Chris's 2 choices. I would just flip-flop the order. I think it's more so tackle than quarterback, because if Matt Corral drops down to the 3rd round, now I don't think that's happening, but some people don't like him. I happen to like him a lot. John has said here on the show that they're bigger fans of Howell than I am. Those are the 2 guys I continue to come back to in a comparison. I like Matt Corral a lot. I don't like Sam Howell a little bit. John seems to believe the Eagles like Sam Howell a lot, and I have no idea what their opinion is on Matt Corral. But if one of those guys is sitting there in the 3rd round, they did it just a couple of years ago and took Jalen Hurts when they thought he was value in the 2nd round, and a lot of dominoes fell thereafter. Oh, I think they could take a quarterback in the 3rd round again. And now it's going to have to be specialized. It's going to have to be that guy. But if the guy does fall that far down, I don't know if a top left tackle falls that far down that they're taking a left tackle even at 101. So that's why I would go with tackle over quarterback as a position they won't be levitating to.
Yeah, Sam Howell to me is Mitch Trubisky light, and that's even saying a lot too.
Ooh.
But I think your landscapers, John, just coming over this way, so I apologize on that one too. But I look at Sam Howell, and I just look at his game, and there's too many times where he was to me he was inconsistent, and that ACC was not a tough conference last year,
Yeah.
and he struggled at times. I know they're gonna say, oh well,
Yeah, I don't like
pieces.
the offense. I tell Jody all the time, I hate their offense. I hate the way they run their offense. He did lose a ton of skill position talent from the year prior. You see all those guys. Javonte Williams, who I love Javonte Williams as a player. Michael Carter, Dynamic Brown. They had another receiver that was drafted. I always forget his name. They had a ton of talent at the skill positions at North Carolina that left. That kind of explained the downtick in production. But I think more so, I think too many people get caught up on what prospects did at the college level, and that's the trick. It's not about what you did at the college; it's about evaluating what you're going to do at the pro level. But I don't like the player either, Jody. I just think
You're just giving us your information from the Eagles. I understand. So I'm not disagreeing with you, John. I'm disagreeing with the Eagles if they think he's a player. I watched the player play with talent around him as a junior, with less talent around him. Why wouldn't he elevate any of those players? Because he's not that good a quarterback, and I don't think he's going to be a good pro quarterback.
And by the way, I think the trade indicates they're not taking a quarterback. I'm firmly in that camp that they now made the decision that they're not taking a quarterback.
Didn't you say that 2 years ago when they had Jalen Hurts as their second round? They're not taking a quarterback. They just gave Carson Wentz a contract. They're not taking a quarterback.
I wasn't even I might have said it because it was stupid, but Jalen Hurts, it went the way it went. Now, the Eagles' thought process, I thought, was sound when they drafted Jalen Hurts. They drafted Jalen Hurts to be a cost-effective backup because their starter was always injured, which I think is pretty sound thinking, but it doesn't take into effect the human element of, hey, not everybody's okay with that, and that's how it kind of unfurled. So, do you think the Eagles learned from that and they just say, because the offseason's been the offseason, Chris, and the Eagles can say whatever they want, but we look at their actions, whether it's checking in on Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, whether it's making this trade, which is basically a neon light saying safety net, safety net, safety net. We don't believe in the quarterback. Is it just they can do this now because they happen to have a quarterback that is mentally strong to handle it, whereas not everybody. In fact, it's probably more likely that it would go in a negative direction. This is one of the unique positives of Jalen Hurts from my perspective.
Well, I still think even with that one, I think it'd be more telling even when you look at the first round or anything like that for it, even the guys there, I don't know. Like, I don't foresee him being somebody who he's mentally strong, and I think he's somebody who you won't see starting to shirk away from it, even though I know people are going to bring up, oh, look what he did when he went to Alabama and Oklahoma. He didn't want to compete. Well, I think that's a whole different situation. But I think overall it won't matter. It won't matter. And if they do take one, it'll be like a 6th or 7th round, like a Bailey Zapp type of guy who just throws a lot. And
the kid from Brown,
EJ Perry. I think I actually have him higher than Sam Howell personally. I think those are a little bit better touch. Like, especially when it's sideline out. Yeah,
he's smart.
It's Jay Fiedler part 2 for the Eagles. There you go.
And just saying this. If the right guy is there in the 3rd round at 83, which is going to make it a day 2 pick, don't discount the possibility of the Eagles taking a quarterback. Now, I don't know if that guy's going to be on the board still, but I'm just saying they've already shown a propensity to, as John correctly described, and nobody understood this when I said it, they're drafting Jalen Hurts to be a low-value, good salary backup quarterback to Carson Wentz. And everyone, you can't do that. How he got it right when he did it, and I sniffed it out ahead of time. And I think they may do that again in the 3rd round this time. Last thing for you, Chris Franklin, we're running a little late. Rodney McLeod not going to be back. Signs a contract with the Colts. They'll find a way to replace what he did on the football field this last year, where he didn't start. He started injured, didn't hit the ground running. Took him time to get healthy enough to make a big play in the next last game of the season. Thanks for that, Rodney. Helped the Eagles make the playoffs last year. How are they going to replace him as a leader? The safety position has been a leader for the Eagles from Dawkins into Malcolm into Rodney. It doesn't have to be, but that's just the way it's been with the Eagles. How big a loss is his leadership on this defense?
I think it's huge because when you look at what he did, when you think about that plane ride they took back after that, they got blown out by they basically dominated by the Raiders, and think you have guys like that turn things around and try to spark things. I think it's going to be huge. And look, when it comes defensively, I don't see anybody in that defensive backfield right now that plays safety doing that. The Slay step up a little bit, maybe perhaps, but I think the easiest one to insert is going to cost you a little bit, and that's Tyrann Mathieu. I think people respect him. I think people do that, and he can insert him as a leader. But when you look at what you have right now on that roster with Marcus Epps, if there's a special teams, maybe
Epsy, come on.
Special teams,
Epsy's my guy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, if he's a special teams captain, if he wants to replace Alex Singleton as a special teams captain, hey, more power to him. But I don't know if he's that type of leader for the defensive side of things on that.
No, but Anthony, you know what? Anthony Harris is a leader, and he's a good guy off the field too.
That's true.
And it's ironic that Rodney and Anthony Harris were college teammates. They ended up as professional teammates, and maybe Rodney sort of mentored Anthony Harris into a leadership position, at least for a year.
You sure
We'll
hope
have
so.
to wait and see. Chris, great stuff. Sorry we got you a little bit late today. We'll punch up again in a couple of weeks. Draft is right around the corner. We'll continue to have fun with it, and we'll have fun with you whenever you come on. Thanks for joining us, bud.
Thanks, guys. Got to do a
Chris.
better job looking at spam.
Chris Franklin, NJ.com, here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout. Come back. We got to put a bow on the show.